My name's Anne McMurray. I'm the chair of the Water Community Greenway, and you're all really welcome. We're really delighted that there's such a level of interest this evening in this topic, because the question as we're framing this evening is, how do we make travelling in East Belfast easier, safer, healthier, and possibly even faster, and definitely more fun. So that's the question that we've asked our speakers to address this evening, and they'll come from lots of different perspectives. Just a wee bit of Zoom etiquette before we start. As I've already suggested, if you wouldn't mind muting your mic while we're doing this, and I'll be doing the same shortly. It just means we cut out the background noises and any interference. Also, as some of you already been doing, please feel free to put comments and questions in the chat box, because as we go through it, there'll be a couple of opportunities to field questions, and I'll be asking some of the speakers perhaps to comment on what's being said. And it's quite possible we'll not cover everything that you might want to cover this evening, so we'll certainly be trying to assess demand and interest for more of these kinds of sessions in the future. So Michelle, if you want to go to the next slide. Yeah, so the purpose of the webinars is really to raise awareness of green issues across East Belfast with a whole range of stakeholders. And a stakeholder just is anybody who's interested or lives here or works here. And we really want to bring together a range of people, policymakers, individuals, citizens, as well as different providers of services. And through doing this, educate ourselves, create new knowledge, and perhaps think about opportunities for new initiatives and ways of delivering new pilots on the Greenway. And I suppose all of us are committed to improving the green infrastructure in the city of Belfast, because we believe it has benefits, not just health benefits, but also economic benefits and well-being benefits. So Michelle, just go to the next slide, please. Keep going, please. Just we've sort of done that. Yeah, just so that you know, you can connect with us even during the session this evening if you want to tweet. You see our Twitter handle there, our Instagram, also our Facebook link. So I'd like to maybe move on to our first speaker. You can see everyone there, and we've got a really interesting group of people lined up. But I'd like to welcome, first of all, Andrew Grieve. And Andrew is head of active living in the Department of Infrastructure. So Andrew, can you turn on your mic and maybe introduce the topic from the policy perspective in the Department of Infrastructure?
Okay, Anne, thank you very much. First of all, I ought to say that Minister Mallon's sorry that she can't be here. She did intend to be here, but when faced with the choice of this seminar or an all-day executive meeting, I'm afraid that the all-day executive meeting won, which is hard for you and I to understand. Anyway, she's unavailable, and she's asked me to just say a few words on her behalf, really, at the start of the seminar. So I suppose the thing maybe just to emphasize is that really since she was appointed as the infrastructure minister back in January, the minister's made it quite clear that she is committed to building infrastructure that makes walking and cycling journeyers easier, safer, and more convenient to undertake. And early on, she did emphasize the fact that her department was not really the Department of Roads and nothing else. She wants walking and cycling really to be at the heart of our whole transport effort. So some of the stuff that we've been doing since then have been an attempt to take forward various actions that would promote active travel as a safe and carbon-free alternative form of transport to the private car. I suppose in a sense, it's like trying to turn a super tanker around. We would like to have made more progress, but we have made a little. So I think this webinar is one of those opportunities that we have to listen to the ideas that others have, to innovative solutions, whatever, that can really help our urban environments to develop as greener and cleaner places. where families and communities can thrive. In a sense, walking and cycling is about place making as much as anything else. Whenever I think about the Connswater Community Greenway, and I'm used to it I'm a user of it, and so I'm reasonably familiar with it. But it always strikes me that it is an excellent example of the positive impact that a regeneration project can have on local communities and environments. And it has, in a sense, it's a victim of its own success. It's been very popular as a commuting route, yes, but also as a valuable local asset for everyday journeys and for other things that are community based as far as the community is concerned. It helps to contribute to what we would say were healthier, more resilient, safer communities. So the minister looks at projects like this, schemes like this, and it underlines her desire to work with councils and other partners like EastSide Greenways to assist in the development and extension of greenways that connect communities and that tackle things like climate change and basically improve people's lives. Now, the one thing that the minister did really want me to emphasise is that the Connswater Greenway, for example, demonstrates the importance of projects and those ideas that are generated out of communities and supported by local communities, rather than one that was sort of imposed from the top down. And it is important to the minister, important to us in the active travel branch as well, important to the walking and cycling champion, that in taking projects forward, we test them and discuss them with local communities and local councils to gain their support. We get lots of ideas put forward to us, and it can be difficult to figure out what's the best one to do. So we believe, Minister believes, that communities and councils have a real role to play in trying to highlight what are the priority projects. Now, you're probably all familiar with the announcement the minister made in the middle of September, about a month ago now, about £2.8 million from the Blue-Green Infrastructure Fund to develop 6 greenway projects, 2 of them in Belfast, the others across Northern Ireland. Now, she has emphasised in her statement that she sees this just as the beginning, and she is involved in discussions, we're involved in discussions on improving other greenway connections right throughout the province. So she has the intention to support more greenway projects in the years to come. It does, of course, depend on how much money she gets in her budget, which unfortunately is given on a year business. So I think that's maybe all that I need to say just at the minute, but certainly I'm looking forward to the discussion that we engage in, and hope to be able to take away ideas that I can share with the minister and share more widely within the department. So I'll hand you back to Anne at that particular point, and I'll be here the whole time to answer questions and to take on board ideas that you have, folks. Okay, thanks.
Andrew, thank you very much for that introduction and for just setting the policy context and the enthusiasm of the minister around this type of work. I'm delighted now to introduce Caroline Bloomfield, who is Chief Exec of Sustrans. Caroline recently took up that post from the PHA and is totally committed to the aims. A lot of experience that Sustrans is dedicated to, such as behaviour change, improving infrastructure and influencing government to make the place more livable. So Caroline, what are your thoughts on the question that we're trying to address this evening?
Thanks very much indeed, Anne, for having me along. I'd just like to say a little bit about what our priorities are in Sustrans and a bit about my own personal experience as well. As you said, I just joined Sustrans 3 months ago after 19 years in public health. And actually, I'd regard this as a continuation of my public health career, because I think that active travel brings so many benefits, both physical and mental. And you know, I've been cycling to work for 30 years now. So I certainly understand the benefits of the health benefits, as well as the importance of having good infrastructure. And And one of the reasons I joined Sustrans, the vision really resonates with me, that the way we choose to travel makes healthier places and happier lives for everyone. Our mission is we really want to make it easier for everyone to walk and cycle. And it's that word everyone is really important. And we have two key priorities. And one is paths for everyone. So greenways, safe routes that a sensible 12-year-old could use on their own. And then the idea of livable cities and towns for everyone. So where more people are supported and enabled to walk and cycle for their everyday journeys. We really want to see a focus about how do we move people in and through a city rather than the focus that's traditionally been on moving cars. And I think making walking and cycling easier for people is really important, because we know that there are a lot of unrepresented groups. I mean, the Bike Life report that was carried out last year showed that in Belfast, 19% of men say they cycle once a week or more. Only 5% of women do. And the main reasons cited are safety and the weather. Now, we maybe can't do very much about the weather, but we absolutely can and should do something about the safety issue. And we do see that where we have safe infrastructure, more people will walk and cycle. I mean, I was on the Comber Greenway this morning and I saw all ages and abilities out, from children cycling to school. So an old lady on a rollator walking her dog, and on all ages in between. And, you know, when I used to cycle into town in the mornings, I hardly ever saw any other women or children on the roads. But as soon as I hit the towpath, it was about 50% women, and there were children as well. So it demonstrates to me that if we really want to be inclusive, we have to put much more investment into providing safe, dedicated infrastructure. And I think there's probably around four, well, there's lots of things that would make a difference, but there's sort of four ones I'd just like to touch on very, very briefly. I think safe routes to school is absolutely critical. I mean, 50% of children in Northern Ireland live under 1 mile away from school, yet 2/3 of children are driven to school. I mean, that's a really shocking statistic. You know, we have an active school travel program that has been really successful at the participating schools, where, you know, we have behaviour change programs to support children to walk and cycle, but we know they would be so much more effective and impactful if they were married with infrastructure improvements. Lots of schools have no crossings outside, some have no footpaths, virtually none of them have cycle paths. And, you know, linked to this, if we could see school streets being piloted here, that would be great, where schools are, the streets that schools sit on are closed to car traffic at drop-off or start and finish times. That would be great to see that piloted here. There's a number happening over the water. We'd love to see more active travel hubs to support behaviour change. We've really seen the success of the C.S. Lewis Square Active Travel Hub, which is sitting on through the intersection of the Conswater Greenway and the Comber Greenway. And Sustrans has been able to run programs for families with young children, for women returning to cycling, for workplaces and many others. Because we know infrastructure is great, but many people require a bit of support and encouragement just to get started cycling and walking again. And we see the biggest benefits when you marry infrastructure and behaviour change together. Greenways is another thing. We'd really love to see more greenways. East Belfast's already blessed with greenways, but there's room for more, and community links to those greenways as well. And I was on the Waterford Greenway about 6 weeks ago, and I was blown away by the hundreds of people on that and the massive tourism boost that had come to that whole area. So I think there's lots more we could do around that. And then one final thing I'd just like to touch on is this idea of end-to-end journeys, sort of multimodal journeys. So how do you, you know, people who could walk or cycle to a bus or a railway station, get the bus or train, and then maybe walk or cycle at the other end of the journey. So, you know, if we were able to get more people in Bangor, for example, to cycle to the railway station, get the train into town, and then walk or cycle, the traffic in East Belfast might be much reduced. Because, you know, there are so many benefits to active travel. You know, I've mentioned physical health. We know that being physically active dramatically reduces a person's risk of stroke, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, a range of other conditions. For mental health, we know that it reduces depression and anxiety. It certainly reduces congestion in our streets, reduces air pollution and noise pollution, and that was very evident during lockdown, and it can bring great tourism benefits. So there are so many benefits to it, and I would just, I would love us all to be able to work together to make East Belfast, the rest of Belfast and Northern Ireland, really exemplar for active travel.
Caroline, thank you so much. That was very, very provocative and very practical, both from your own personal experience and those 4 practical things you'd like to see happen. And just on some of those cycling programs that I've been doing, introducing people to cycling, I know that friends of mine from West Belfast actually went over to that course in C.S. Lewis Square to get back on the bike. So well done in reaching out across the city. Thank you very much. Now I'm delighted to introduce Professor Geraint Ellis, who is Professor at Queen's University at the School of Natural and Built Environment. And we wanted to invite someone, we'd met Geraint before, but someone who could actually provide what I would call some thought leadership in terms of the evidence base and the science links behind what we're trying to do here. So Geraint, over to you.
Okay, good evening everyone, and thanks for the invitation. I hope you can see my slides now, can you? What I was going to say, I was given 7 minutes, which clearly isn't usually what we act on in academic time. So I'm not sure whether I can live up to this. And it's not very forensic, particularly. I think in 7 minutes, what I wanted to do was get what I thought was maybe 7 key points that could be debated or otherwise on some principles. And those of you that are, live and breathe transport and transport planning will be well aware of these, and so it might not be that new to you. So what I was going to do is run through these as some core principles that many of them actually complement what Caroline said anyway. So let's see if I can do this. So the first one, and I speak as a planner for decades now, is actually when we think of transport, the main thing, actually, transport isn't the problem, it's planning. And I think what I mean by here is actually, in an ideal world, we don't have any transport because it is a very major social and economic cost on us all. And we don't often think of it in that way. It takes time out of our lives that we could be using far more productively. It clearly is a very major economic impact. It has major environmental ones and so on. So actually, the biggest principle is we need to plan out travel the best as we can. And to do this, there are models of planning that maybe we've lost over the years. So since the 1950s, essentially all UK cities, US cities, and many European ones have been built around the car. Major blocks of land use, out-of-town shopping centres, university campuses, and so on, just dotted around the city, which actually means you've got to travel around the whole city, mostly by car, to do your day's business. So we've got to try and pull that back, which is difficult because actually, it's really embedded in the structure of the city and actually in our behavior. So there are a number of planning models that start to hint on that. One is transport-orientated development, where you increase densities around maybe major transport hubs, maybe like the future Great Victoria Street. But there are really useful glimpses. So we've talked for a while of the 10-minute city, and most recently, which one of the images is here, is the 15-minute city, which has been pursued by the recent mayor of Paris, Anne Hidalgo. And she has the aspiration that nowhere in Paris should anyone live 15 minutes more to do their day's business, working, healthcare, education, and all that, by walking or cycling. So if we can do that, it's a major challenge, but as a principle, if we can start embedding that, that will go a long way to achieving our principles. So the second one, which is not a surprise as well, it might be a bit obvious, is while cars have clearly increased our freedoms over the time and choice for where we live and where we work, everyone knows they're actually killing us. They're killing our economies, our urban economies. For example, all the money we spend on cars and on petrol goes right out of the local economy virtually to the Middle East or to car makers elsewhere. It's killing us environmentally. We know that the figures from air pollution, obesity, and so on. And actually, clearly, it transects our communities as well and kills a lot of our social life and community cohesion as well. It kills biodiversity, you name it. So we know it's a really bad thing, and maybe I don't have to convince you for that. And it's actually, despite this, it's really built into not just the structure of our city, but culturally, economically, behaviorally, we have car dependency, even if we don't realize it. So when we start talking about alternative models, it seems extremely radical, which actually, to me, it's fundamentally rational. And we need to kick back on the car dependency that's within us, I think. And an example of that is since 2002, the Northern Ireland Executive, sorry, Andrew, has actually had a commitment to actually reduce car dependency since 2002. And actually it's virtually made no headway into that because of the deep, I think, roots of car dependency in our society. It's a big challenge, and clearly something that we need to turn around. The third one here is clearly, if we know car is the least favored, yet actually the most favored in our policies, our economics, and our culture, we need to be very clear of turning that pyramid upside down. And I'm sure this image is very clear to many of you. And we need a really, really sustained effort using carrots, sticks, and anything else we can to turn around in terms of investment, behavior, planning, and so on. So actually, the natural thing is that we invest in pedestrianisation far more than anything else. We incentivize it or decentivize cars, and so on. And clearly, accompanying this is something that Caroline said, is it's impossible that we do all our travel by pedestrian or cycling. So we really need to work harder on integration. When we have to get the bus, or even if we have to take a car for a short time, how we integrate with other modes, so at least we can cut down on that. And that's not just on attitude, it's about physical infrastructure, cross-through ticketing, frequency of services, and so on. And those are all clearly common principles in transport planning. So that's probably all well known to you. The fourth one that I wanted to get ahead is the clear message that actually the future ain't what it used to be. Because if you look at projections of the future, either projections from the past of the future or actually ones we're making now, they tend to be very technologically focused, as if the technology is the problem, and yet we neglect the real problems that we're facing mobility and actually the opportunities that we could grasp through the technology. Now, clearly, if you look at this image here, that's an image from maybe 30 or 40 years ago about what travel could be. Yet all the bad principles is there, apart from the obvious sexual distribution of labor that's obviously changed rapidly. It's still individual cars. It's the only difference is actually the congestions in the air as well. And that's what we're still pursuing. So the obsession that electric cars will solve our mobility problems is wrong. Autonomous cars might prove it a little bit because it makes more efficient road space, but we need to get away from that. So, the seductive ways that Elon Musk is pretending to change our urban mobility is fundamentally wrong. We need to think, what is it that we need in mobility, and change that, rather than just adjust a different fuel or a different technology to the real problems. Now, that's not saying that the opportunities of smart technologies and big data can help us. So there's a lot we can do with, for example, apps to actually increase car sharing, make public transport far more efficient because we know when the buses are coming, how we shift the transportable modes when we know cars are available, parking available, and so on. And clearly things like Lime scooters and bike sharing schemes can actually use big data to help us, and they can be really useful in actually bridging that transport integration gap as well. The next thing, and again, it's a picture of Minister Mallon here and a recent initiative she's done is, and again, it's not rocket science, that actually we need to go on a road diet. Everyone knows that when we build roads, they fill up. And we've been on this addiction for decades now. A great planner in the 1950s, Lewis Mumford, said, a quote that you might know, that adding highway lanes to deal with traffic congestion is like loosening your belt to deal with obesity. And yet, despite that, we're still going ahead with major transport infrastructure, road infrastructure in Northern Ireland. The Yorkgate scheme, 150 million, which could transform more sustainable reasons. We're going from the A5, that's over £1 billion. So actually, we're still really addicted to this. And despite that, global trends look like we've reached peak car in many, many societies. Maybe not in Northern Ireland, and that reflects maybe our planning. So it looks like actually we've met saturation because of a whole variety of reasons, of demographic reasons. We're meeting the economic bounds of car use and so on. So actually to invest in more roads when we know actually demand could well fall away in the next couple of decades is insane, when we could actually be using that money for more sustainable modes. So actually what we need to do is start, rather than building others, start to reclaim. We've seen under COVID more pop-up cycle lanes, and yet we haven't had a disaster of congestion. And related to that is this pop-up park, which is a really nice little initiative in the Ormo Road that you might have seen recently, where actually all you do is take a number of car parking spaces. And clearly it's been shown if you can reduce car parking spaces of 1 or 2% in a city a year, over 20 years, you can actually have a very, very major radical impact on modal change. The sixth one is where we do see there's been very major modal shifts and really good impacts on these sorts of things, is cities that have really taken leadership and taken it seriously. So one of the most, to take long-term shifts, we need very long-term committed political leadership. One of the most well-known is Copenhagen, clearly from the 70s and 80s, really adopted pushing cycling forward through grand and small schemes, and just stuck with that over decades to achieve what we see as probably the best cycling city in the world. We've had other examples. People my age might remember the Greater London Council that did really innovative things with subsidising public transport. It realised actually that as a social leveller. We see really good things happening in Paris now and in Madrid. So we just have to look elsewhere. This image, this rather beautiful image, is a cycle roundabout in the Netherlands, which you might have seen as well. So actually, this leadership is really clear. And I don't think in Northern Ireland we've quite reached the time where actually people vote for politicians for transport. Clearly, there's other political problems, but we really need to get into that position and know that other worlds are possible. And then finally, this is a picture of our beloved Connswater Greenway. We need to think of actually what works. And if there's anything that I think acts as a really, really good example of this, it's the Greenway. And I remember when it was projected, it was really visionary by East Belfast community. And a lot of people weren't interested or weren't bothered. I know the government at the time would rather the money go into the Titanic Museum, but actually it's been remarkable about what's happened. And once we've established that, clearly now everyone wants to have a Greenway. And I think because it's actually demonstrated all the various things that can achieve, that's really, really important. So it's really, we need to, harness that pioneering spirit, build on it, get the network out, maybe plan around it now rather than, with some of the things that I've said. So it's a great example, and I think actually leads the way in some of these things.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Geraint. That was a really stimulating presentation and very clearly put through. And I just would love one of those big cycle roundabouts somewhere around Belfast. If you would stop sharing your screen now, Geraint, please. And because the next person that I want to introduce is Jonathan Hobbs from Northern Ireland Greenways. Jonathan's a cyclist and a passionate Greenways advocate. And I know that Jonathan also has got some slides. So Jonathan, I'm going to hand over to you for the next 10 minutes.
Thanks very much. And if everybody can see that, are we presenting? Let me just see. Should be coming up now. There we go. And thanks to Geraint. Actually, I didn't even give him a fiver, but that was quite the lead into my section. I want to look at that idea of kind of building on success, taking what is really good about the Connswater Greenway, the Cumber Greenway, and saying, let's look outwards. Let's look at the full kind of greenway network that's being proposed. So I'm Jonathan Hobbs. I've been working as a volunteer campaigner over the last 8.5 years, and actually, in reflection, I've been probably preparing for this for quite a lot longer. But my first introduction to the idea of disused railways was on a holiday back when I was 10 years old in Cork, and in Ballydehob there was this lovely big stone bridge across the bay there, and I realised that was an old railway, and I thought, well, what a waste. Why do we not have a railway still across that? And being interested in trains as a kid as well, I was aware of the fact that then we had these maps of old railway networks that no longer existed, and what we can do is we can kind of overlay what there currently is in terms of live railway network, and you can see what is lying disused and abandoned, and what could potentially be a really good resource. So that kind of sparked an interest for me in trying to look for these things. So back 8.5 years ago, I'm massively into Google Maps and satellite imagery as well, enabled me to start to go and actually track where these old routes were. So you could actually kind of go down and see the old railway network from above. And this would be an example of one where there's like a little cutting through, going up through Glenara Forest Park. So then beside that, I was able to kind of go out and actually visit some of these places as well, which is a wonderful thing to be able to go and do. And you can find some amazing sites in Northern Ireland. And that is this cutting, as was before the trees got chopped down a few years ago, but a magical place. And just to be able to go out, take pictures of it, and then just say, look, this is where we could be bringing tourists. This is where we could be bringing people to cycle and to walk in our communities and out and about in rural areas as well. So what I did with that is really kind of put a website together and started to chop these projects up and really just kind of market them as well. So taking that idea of the Glens of Antrim Greenway and using that wonderful imagery, or the Greenway of Thrones going between Ballymoney and Ballycastle. It's not that well known, but just up at the top of the road there, you can see where it goes off to the right, there's an old railway bridge, just so an old railway runs underneath there. And that idea of, the dark hedge as being really popular as part of the Game of Thrones series, it's a great tag. It's a great way to encourage people to come and visit and travel actively to these places. So on the back of the work that I did for a number of years then, the Department for Infrastructure adopted the Greenway strategy in 2016. And you'll see Andrew Grieve in the background there. He turns up in most pictures of cycling and Greenway launches over the last 10 years. It's like Where's Wally? You can find him in most of these pictures. So that adopted a 1,000 kilometre network to be created over the 25 years from 2016, with an indicative budget of about 150 million. And was just mentioned a few moments ago, that's about the cost of the York Street interchange could develop this entire network. I think it'll probably be a slightly more than that over the course of those 25 years, but it's an interesting comparison. But what do we actually have at the moment? The existing network of greenways and pathways is quite limited, sort of mostly focused around Belfast and North Down Coastal Path, obviously the Conswater Greenway and Cumber Greenway, and the towpath, some in Derry as well. And probably the one that I really love, which is the Newry Canal Path, which we undersell, I think, quite a lot. It's a really fantastic facility. And, you look at what's happening in Westport or Waterford, that could really be sold internationally as a great tourist destination. But where's the money gone for these over the course of that strategy being released? Whenever the strategy was released, the department put in £160,000 for feasibility studies into 20 projects. They got about £8,000 each over 10 council areas, and that's a kind of a map of where that investment went. Then just after that, there was Interreg funding, €23 million put into 3 areas, basically cross-border projects between Newry and Carlingford, the Ulster Canal between Monaghan and Armagh, and then obviously the really, really fantastic Northwest Greenway project, which is currently underway in Derry and Strabane. Then there's been another £75,000 put in by the Department for Infrastructure, but this was just really as the Assembly collapsed, sort of early in 2017, and that really put everything in terms of greenway development in Northern Ireland in a bit of a freeze, which was particularly unfortunate given there was such goodwill about it all. Luckily, the Public Health Agency then stepped in August 2018 and put another £200,000 into more detailed design funding for councils. So 8 projects got £25,000 each out of those. And then finally, as has been mentioned earlier, the £2.8 million put in under the Blue Green Infrastructure Fund just last month. So there's 6 projects there which have got a certain amount of funding for each. What I would say is, and it's great to see that, and some of them are really, really interesting, like potentially dueling a bit of the lag and tow path coming out of Belfast. But what's interesting is we're not really expanding that map yet. It's the first time I've put this map together to kind of get a sense of that, and I think that that's got to be one of the next things, is looking to expand that map in terms of trying to encourage local communities to get involved in this, encourage councils to look at projects and see if they're viable. One aspect of that expansion may well be the Shared Ireland Fund, which was announced a few days ago. So that's a €500 million fund, which part of it will be on cross-border greenways, and specifically the Sligo to Enniskillen Greenway. But I think that it's time that we look beyond just what's been put in already. And this is just a really quick overview then of where the investment has gone. Sort of by council area in Northern Ireland. So you'll see that kind of split investment on cross-border regions. But when you look at Fermanagh and Omagh and Mid-Ulster only getting £16,000, that's something I think we really, really need to build upon. So in terms of what's actually happening out there right now, again, the map is quite thin on the ground, and it's really where we want to see that being expanded. Want to see the Department for Infrastructure trying to put funds in. But I think a lot of what we talked about earlier on was about the idea of community up engagement on these kind of projects. And what's interesting is up on the top right there, you'll see the Ballymena to Cushendall Greenway, which is that one with the trees that I showed you a little moment or two ago. Interestingly, Mid and East Antrim Borough Council haven't received money from the government for any feasibility study or anything at all, but they have seen the benefit of that greenway and have gone ahead, done the designs, and I've actually started to build a section of it already. I'm not sure exactly when it's going to be open, but it's really interesting to see that there's somewhere who's just going on ahead and getting on with it. So really just the priorities for this current year. I mean, it's good to see the Minister is very engaged and there is capital coming down the line, but I think what we need is a kind of a multi-year capital grants project for councils and communities to be able to tap into for these sort of projects, developing dedicated resources within those delivery bodies. The key thing is working to address issues with land access and how that can be managed. And I think there's opportunities there with Brexit and the changing of environment bills and things like that to maybe be able to add a payment for landowners for access to their land may be a way to kind of free that up. And then, as I said, expanding that map so that we have all 1,000 kilometres of the strategy up to at least feasibility study stage over the next year is certainly feasible. And then resetting the targets for delivery. In the strategy, it said that about 450 kilometres, would be built by 2026. I don't think that's realistic at this stage, given the freeze that there was. So I think let's set some realistic targets and a multi-year kind of step-by-step targets to get us to a better place. But really, the key point is find ways to get yourself involved in your local projects and to try and see how we can expand the network and look to, take the Connswater and Cumber Greenways onto the next level to be, I want to see the Connswater Greenway thrive, but I also want to see it as a gateway to a day trip down to Newcastle, all the way down there just by Greenway. I want to see, Laganside being the gateway to Larne, and maybe, actively traveling to Scotland then across in the ferry and things like that when we're able to do such things again. So it's about trying to be trying to work collectively, and I think that's where a lot of those projects that we've seen, and even the Connswater Greenway as well, where people have come together and really driven it from below. So that's really me. So you can also, there's a lot of detail in that presentation. I've made it available on the NI Greenway site, just on the front page, if you want to go and see that kind of timeline of where we've been. So that's me.
Jonathan, thank you so much for such an informative overview and the work, obviously, that you have put into actually mapping all of that. And we loved the bit about, yes, applause there. We loved the bit about you as a 10-year-old being inspired by railway lines. And as somebody that's originally from Cookstown, and I can remember the train, I remember going on the train from Cookstown to Derry, you know, those are places that could be sort of restored, absolutely. I suppose just to say as well, you know, one of the things that we always say about the Conswater, it's an outdoor community centre. And if anything that's been valued in any way over the last 6 months has been people's ability and facility to get outdoors and explore and walk and get some kind of recovery time, if you like, from what the restrictions on civil liberties, if you like. So it's it would be a very tangible investment. When I look at sort of the money that's going in, it's very, very little. So there's a direct call to action there, I think, that you're making to us all. Excellent. There are a few comments and questions going in, and I want to maybe just take a few minutes now just to bring in some of you who've been listening and just to make your comment. Not really necessarily going to invite answers, because there's still a couple of people that we want to invite to speak and give their reflections, and that's Kate Taggart from Belfast City Council and Trevor Anderson from the Belfast Harbour Commissioners. But interested in just some of the views that are being expressed here on the sidebar. So Johnny, can I bring you in first? Johnny Curry from EBCDA. You're making a point there about Belfast bikes, Johnny.
Thanks, Anne. I guess it was more about really just how we can manage some of that huge commuter traffic that comes from those councils that are just outside Belfast. I think all that traffic has a massive impact on the health and well-being of inner city residents in inner East Belfast especially. So it's how we can push those drivers into more sustainable transport routes. For Ards and North Down, for example, you have the train line, which is great if you can take out a loan to buy an annual ticket and afford it. And I suppose Greenways is a really good option to explore. So whenever the department announced the £2.8 million funding package last month for Greenways, I thought, happy days. And then when I looked down the amounts, I saw that Ards and North Down has got the grand total of £12,500 for Greenways, which is basically an awards for all grant in terms of amount of money. So my question, I suppose, for the department is around where does the responsibility start and end between local councils and central government around those Greenway models, taking them seriously, especially for those councils that are closest to Belfast, where there's so much commuter traffic and so much extra housing that's been built in those greenbelt areas that just seems to just go on and on and on.
Johnny, thanks for that. And it's a really good point, because earlier today, I was saying to Andrew, I pulled off the report on attitudes to walking, cycling and public transport. And one of the #1 reasons that people don't walk or cycle more is because of safety and the volume of traffic, etc. And so your point is very well made on the congestion and volume of traffic that's coming into Belfast.
Say something on just on the Greenways point, or
yeah, go ahead, please, Andrew. If you're happy to comment, reply, yeah. Go ahead.
Just as a comment, the minister would have announced £10 million this year for Greenways if councils had been able to spend it. We wrote out to councils in July and asked them to identify programs, Greenway programs that were ready to start being built this year. And there were 6 programs identified, 6 projects identified, and all 6 of those projects were funded. So the real issue here is not providing funding. That's not the issue. The issue is having projects that are ready to be built. Mm-hmm. And it gets back to part of what Jonathan said about getting yourselves involved and getting what the minister said about local communities, etc. There is a lot of work needs to be done to persuade communities and stakeholders and landowners to be involved in a greenway. And that can take years to do. Conswater Community Greenway is a classic example. How long was it? 10 years? So there's a lot of background work needs to be done, and there's a lot more we need to do between councils and the department to do that background work to get greenways to the position where they can actually be built. But all those projects that were ready to be started this year, the minister provided funding for them all.
Thanks for that, Andrew. And it sort of does speak to Jonathan's point about the need for feasibility studies and so forth to get these projects oven ready. So when the funding opportunities are there, they can be quickly moved. And you're right, Andrew, about the work it takes to actually get to the end point. We talk about the Connswater being a 10-year overnight success. And it does take a long time. Can I maybe move on to Michelle, who is the EastSide Greenways project manager and also the assistant chief exec of the partnership. And we do have a vision for extending the Connswater throughout East Belfast. So Michelle, maybe you'd like to share that with people and they'll get an idea of what we're building on.
Yes, and thank you. So I'm just going to briefly share what stage we're at, and I'm sure a few of you in the room have seen this before, and we're at our launch last year. But you know, we talk a lot about Connswater Community Greenway, and it's been a huge success in East Belfast. It's created great legacy for local people. People have been so at the heart of the project, and it is looked at as an exemplary project in terms of involving local communities. But for us, we're at a stage of looking to the future and making sure the Connswater Community Greenway delivers against our aims and objectives, which is always around creating a vibrant, healthy, accessible, connected East Belfast. And we do that and operate that alongside Belfast City Council. But so we want to ensure that every resident in East Belfast is connected, and the Greenway, you know, is connected up our local parks, our facilities, our destinations, our schools, etc. But we realise there's some gaps in the area, and we also want to ensure that East Belfast is connected to other council areas and other parts of the city. So we developed the EastSide Greenways concept plan about a year ago, and went out and done engagement and consultation with other government departments. So it has, you know, cross-agency support from DFI, Sustrans, and Belfast City Council, for example. So when we talk about shelf-ready projects, I suppose we have one here, and I do have a meeting with Liz Loughran, who's a walking cycling champion, and we do want to follow up with the minister. And I know East Belfast is looked upon, you know, as the infrastructure's there, and we've got two amazing, fantastic greenways. But for us as a organisation and our board, we want to continue to build on the success of the greenway, and we want to continue to build more linkages. So, you know, we would love, I'm just going to flick this one. And some of them are underway. So you may have seen the recent development of Bloomfield Walkway, which Belfast City Council and DFI invested in, and we're currently developing Ballymacarrot Walkway. And we want to ensure that real strong connection to the city centre, and for visitors when they come to East Belfast, that they're well connected. But just some other networks that we see as key priorities are Sydenham and also Montgomery Road. So fingers crossed, we are on the, we'll have another overnight 10-year success, and in 10 years' time, we'll have an even stronger connected East Belfast through the EastSide Greenways network.
Thank you very much, Michelle. If you want to release the screen there. So we're all aware, obviously, East Belfast is part of the overall Belfast City, and the Belfast City Council have the Belfast Agenda. And, you know, Belfast City Council and also the Belfast Harbour Commissioners are two of the big anchor organisations in Belfast, and who drive a lot of the development in the city, or facilitate it and enable it. So both Kate and Trevor, you're very welcome this evening. You've listened to what's been said. I'd like to invite Kate, first of all, from Belfast City Council, maybe to share some of her perspectives on terms of how this fits with what the City Council's plans are. Kate, please. And then Trevor, I'll bring you in after.
Thanks, Sam. First of all, really want to thank the three speakers, because I think you mentioned it, but it gives it gives the policy, it gives a specialist view, and it gave a very practical view. But all three were also, another P, very passionate, and I think it links, as you say, the fact that if ever there was a time, it's now. And while obviously council has the Belfast agenda, along, and that's not a council document, it's a city partner document, and there's lots obviously of references both in the Belfast agenda and a host of other policies and frameworks that council has around valuing, I suppose, the need for safer and more connected and more sustainable transport, sustainable transport links. And I suppose the most recent experience throughout, obviously, the emergency response, and now hopefully as we're moving a wee bit more into recovery, is about the time is now, because the significant emotional and physical well-being impacts around access to clean and green and open and usable space has never probably been more valued. So council has recently shared, I suppose, a recovery plan for the city, and that's obviously our immediate priority had to be to ensure that we could deliver critical, business critical services, and also working with many of you in the room and local partners in the community recovery. Thoughts are starting to turn, barring the executive announcement yesterday, obviously, but thoughts are starting to turn as to how can we build better for the future. And obviously part of that is around, a different way of doing business, a different way of thinking about our priorities. And I suppose it's opportune to hear from people from like Geraint and others on, well, what have we got wrong in the past? And what do we need to do, as Michelle says, the overnight success of the Connswater Greenway. And it is a credit to East Belfast Partnership and the people of Belfast. And I suppose some of us, and I'm proud, council were a partner there on, what is achievable whenever people decide that this is a good thing to do. And definitely the Connswater Greenway has demonstrated the impact, and not just the impact from the physical environment impact, but the emotional impact, the way that the Greenway, as you have said, Anne, is like an outdoor community centre. It's about bringing people together, it's about inclusive access to space, and it's just about making people feel better about the way they live their lives, and that's really, really important. One of the things that I was going to mention to people is, I suppose, coming out of the recovery plan is, I don't know if people have seen it yet, the connectivity study at Boulder Belfast, and about some of the work that that's trying to do, I suppose, to set out how we can have a more green, walkable, cyclable, is that a word, network of streets and places in the city, which improves the health for all people, but also revitalises the city economy and restores that sense of collective pride. And so it's early days. I don't think it's, I think it's only recently been agreed. It is setting out, it was Belfast City Council, the Department for Infrastructure, Andrew, and the Department for Communities, along with broad stakeholder input and agreement. But I suppose what it is saying is it's setting out some of the things that Geraint has said about what can be done, maybe looking at some of those really innovative models and I think there's that part of the document does show, like, green walkways over the West Link and things like that. But it's about basically that overwhelming consensus that something really needs to change, and it's that we need to we need to start doing it now. So I think across all of those maybe policies and frameworks, the Belfast agenda, I know our Resilience Commissioner, Grania, was on a previous webinar, the green and blue infrastructure, or hopefully soon to be finalised Belfast Open Spaces Strategy, and now this Boulder Belfast, that it's demonstrating that council and our elected members, some of whom obviously here with us, does have a commitment to work with local built ideas, but with other government agencies to say the time's right. And there's no point in having all these policies and frameworks. What we need to do is get into action. So it's just a quick, I suppose, summary of where we are, and the fact that, I suppose, like everyone else, we're up for it.
Yeah, Excellent, Kate. And you're right. I mean, the policy and strategy framework is there. Andrew's saying the funding is there. And Gary put a comment there. How do we speed these up? It doesn't take 10 years. I think tangible change is what people are really keen to see now. Trevor, thank you very much for joining us. Trevor is the Director of Infrastructure in Belfast Harbour Commissioners. Trevor, you've been listening and I'm really interested in where your thoughts are, because obviously you've got a lot of plans for redevelopment around the harbour estate. So would you like to maybe share your thoughts?
Thanks, Anne, and listen, thanks for the invite to be here. Some fascinating discussion so far, and in some respects I'm kind of embarrassed to be following on from it, because we're relatively new into this discussion topic about walking and cycling in the harbour. We've had a kind of strong sustainability agenda for a long time, but it was, you know, mostly about air quality, water quality, biodiversity, decarbonisation, and those things. So walking and cycling discussion is a relatively new subject for us. And having said that, there's quite a number of people in this call, like Andrew and Caroline, that you know we've been engaged with recently to help us shape our thought process on it. If I maybe start by just talking a little bit about how the harbour's mindset and strategy has changed over the course of the last few years. We refreshed our strategy last year, and in the new strategy, and some of you may have seen it communicated in the press or may have heard it firsthand, there's a number of new components that indicate a kind of very different mindset. There's a few themes like, you know, developing a key economic hub and creating an iconic waterfront for the city that, you know, never would have featured before. The harbour always saw itself as a gateway for trade, as opposed to really you know, an economic hub or a quarter of the city, essentially. But more than just those themes, there's a different mindset in terms of how we carry out the strategy. So there's a much stronger emphasis in partnering with others to help deliver on shared ambitions and connecting more with the city and connecting with the local communities around the harbour. And overall, really about how we can use our resources in the harbour to help stimulate sustainable, inclusive growth and grow jobs and so on. So a very different mindset than the more inward-looking sort of strategic focus that we might have had in the past. As you say, there's a lot of development happening in the harbour. You know, on Queen's Island, in Titanic Quarter, on the City Quay side, there's a lot of new buildings, there's a lot of new jobs coming in. And one of the challenges whenever you do that, particularly in the harbour, which is Queen's Island is a peninsula, so it's kind of one way in and one way out a little bit. So moving people around is a significant challenge that we have to address. And if I, you know, go back to some of the things Garrett said, one of the thought processes about the design of the area is to create a mixed use area where people can live, work and play and don't have to travel too far to get to their work, and therefore try to minimize the amount of commuters at source. But beyond that, we'll always have commuters, and we need sustainable transport plans to help move those people around in an appropriate way. We do need some different thinking on some of the policies and planning, because when we look at some of the developments in the area, the planning approvals that have been granted to some of those developments not only perpetuate the car mentality, but actually multiply it. Some of the new developments have planning approval for 2 and 3 times the amount of traffic per square foot that we're actually seeing on the ground today, and you know that can't work for us. So there's changes in planning approach and policy that need to take place. In terms of moving people around, for those people who aren't going to live, work and play in the area, the key thing for us is getting them out of their cars, getting them onto public transport. And we're looking at different ways that we can incentivize that. We're talking with TransLink about improving frequency, improving connectivity between rail stations and parts of the harbour with bus services. There's a lot of exploration of that multimodal transport that Caroline mentioned. So let's say you come from Bangor on the train to the harbour, you've got a 1.6 mile walk if you have to get to Catalyst at the top of Queen's Road. So it's not very inviting, but if we can put bike stations and we can put internal shuttles in place, we can maybe encourage more people to get onto the train. Inevitably in our culture, there'll be a lot of people who cling to their cars, and one of the things that we're trying to do with those people is encourage them to share cars. Some of the measurements that we've taken in the area suggest that car occupancy is sitting about 1.1 or 1.2. So if you could get that up to like 1.8, you would make a massive difference to the number of cars on the road. And then of course, walking and cycling is a critical component of it. And we've been recently talking to some experts to help us design. There's a new concept of an innovation district in the Harbour Estate to try to attract in, different kinds of investment. And one of the messages that we're getting from the experts in that area is to make the place walkable. And so a lot of the thought process is going into how do you do that. Let me say a little bit about technology. I totally agree on the comment about electric vehicles. If we replaced all the cars in the Harbour Estate with electric vehicles, we'd still have the congestion problem. It would be cleaner, but we would still have congestion problems. So electric vehicles isn't the answer, but one of the things that we've been exploring recently with BT is how do we use information to help inform our commuters, help give them different choices in terms of planning their journey in a multimodal way. And we're looking at, using various apps and various camera sensors to see what's going on within the traffic situation and connecting into public transport timetables and those kind of things. So I think big data and technology can help it in that sense. But the big focus in many respects is walking and cycling, because you don't need the same level of infrastructure to deliver that. It brings in that kind of well-being dimension, and there's a lot of benefit in that. So that's how recently we've been talking to the likes of Andrew and his team, Caroline's team, etc., to help give us some ideas about how to address the infrastructure offering, but also how to provide that support mechanism to help people make the right choices and to support them during those choices. So we're very keen to continue to engage in those things. We'll be very keen to engage with the EastSide partnership, because one of the kind of early wins that we're looking to try to get is how do we improve the cycle connectivity from the Sam Thompson Bridge through Airport Road and through Sydenham Road and Queen's Road. Just yesterday, and I know Kerry's on the call, with Kerry and a number of people in the Titanic Quarter area, we were sharing some thoughts and ideas. And Kerry was saying we need to engage with the EastSide partnership on that process. So would be very keen to reach out to you to say, work with us and help us think it through, because we are far from experts in this area, but we've got a willingness to try to do the right thing here.
And thank you very much, Trevor, for giving us that sort of such a comprehensive understanding of what the plans in the harbour are. And it's also really good to hear that people are talking with each other and collectively trying to envision a better way of doing things. As we move into the middle of the 21st century, it's going to be people who are on this call who are influencers and policymakers and activists who actually will shape the infrastructure that will be the legacy that we'll leave going forward. So Thank you all. We're really out of time, unfortunately, but that's where we want to leave. We want to leave you wanting more. And if you do want more, we're going to be back in November. I'll just check my phone here. On the 19th of November at 6:30, where we're going to be looking at creating high quality, energy efficient green homes. So we really want to look at sort of housing and how we live in a more sort of energy efficient way, but live well in East. So look, folks, thank you so much. Lots of chat and ideas and campaign planning going on here in the right. And people have already been tweeting, so we appreciate that. And just thank you for your interest and stay connected. And I'd like particularly to thank all of our speakers this evening for such stimulating, provocative and informative contributions. So well done, everybody. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your evening and keep cycling.